What if I told you that the most powerful healing protocol ever designed wasn't created in a pharmaceutical lab, but was written down over 3,000 years ago in the pages of your Bible? Most people don't know this, but the meals described in Scripture aren't just quaint historical anecdotes. They are precise, divinely inspired nutritional prescriptions that modern clinical science is only just beginning to understand. Today, I'm going to walk you through 20 of these biblical meals, ranked from profoundly healing to absolutely life-changing. Stick around because number 13 on this list was a stew so potent that a man traded his entire inheritance for a single bowl. And modern research now shows exactly why. And number 20, the meal given to a prophet during a complete physical and mental breakdown, contains a specific combination of sprouted grains and legumes that forms a perfect, complete protein, a fact that food scientists wouldn't formally articulate for another 3 millennia. Before we get into the list, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell. We uncover these ancient truths backed by modern science every single week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Here are 20 biblical meals ranked from deeply restorative to absolutely extraordinary. Number 20, the prophet's recovery bread, the complete protein matrix of the ancient world. In the book of Ezekiel, chapter 4, verse 9, God gives the prophet a very specific recipe during a time of siege and extreme duress. Take wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, and spelt, put them in one vessel and make bread of them. This wasn't a random collection of grains. This was a precise nutritional command. Modern science has caught up in a stunning way. When you combine these specific grains and legumes, you form a complete protein, meaning all 9 essential amino acids are present, which is extraordinarily rare in the plant kingdom. But the ancient wisdom goes deeper. The traditional method involved sprouting the grains and legumes before grinding and slow baking them. We now know that sprouting breaks down phytic acid, an anti-nutrient that blocks your absorption of critical minerals like zinc, iron, and magnesium. A loaf of Ezekiel bread made this way transforms into a dense, bioavailable source of sustained energy. The soluble fiber from the sprouted barley and legumes creates a gel in your digestive tract, slowing glucose absorption, stabilizing your blood sugar for hours, and feeding your beneficial gut bacteria. Think of it as a construction crew for your microbiome, showing up every morning to rebuild the foundation of your immune system, your mental health, and your metabolism from the ground up. Here's the traditional use. Sprout equal parts of these 6 ingredients until you see a tiny tail emerge. Then grind them, mix with water, a pinch of salt, and a generous pour of extra virgin olive oil, and bake at a low temperature. We forgot this meal because we traded it for quick-rise white flour bread that spikes your insulin and starves your gut bacteria. Think of Ezekiel's bread as the original energy bar, designed not by a food scientist, but by the creator of the human body himself. Number 19, the Promised Land breakfast, a fig and barley bowl that stabilizes your entire day. When God described the Promised Land to the Israelites, he listed 7 specific foods, and 2 of them were barley and figs. Combining them into a single morning meal creates a metabolic shield that carries you through the day. Figs are rich in a soluble fiber called pectin and the mineral potassium, which most modern diets are dangerously deficient in. Barley, as I've mentioned, contains the highest concentration of beta-glucan of any grain on Earth. This is the fiber that has been studied in multiple clinical trials for its ability to significantly lower LDL cholesterol and stabilize post-meal blood sugar. When you eat them together, the pectin from the figs and the beta-glucan from the barley form a slow-release matrix in your gut. This isn't just breakfast. This is a deliberate biological intervention. Your energy stays level, your cravings diminish, and your gut bacteria receive a feast of prebiotic fuel that reduces systemic inflammation. Here's the traditional use. Take whole, hulled barley and cook it slowly in water until it's tender and creamy. Chop a handful of dried or fresh figs and stir them in with a pinch of cinnamon and a drizzle of raw honey. We forgot this meal because we replaced it with boxed cereals that are extruded through metal dies at high heat, destroying any living enzymes and fortifying them with synthetic vitamins. Think of this bowl as a slow-burning hearth fire for your metabolism, compared to the flash paper of a modern sugary breakfast. Number 18. The fisherman's post-resurrection meal, charcoal-grilled fish that rebuilds your brain. In the book of Luke, chapter 24, after Jesus rises from the tomb, he appears to his terrified disciples and asks for something to eat. They give him a piece of broiled fish, and he eats it in their presence. The fish from the Sea of Galilee, likely tilapia or a type of sardine, were packed with long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA. These are the fats that your brain is literally made of. Modern neurology has demonstrated that DHA is a critical structural component of the cerebral cortex, and a deficiency is linked to cognitive decline and mood disorders. But the cooking method matters immensely. Broiling or charcoal grilling fish preserves the fragile omega-3 fats. Battering it and frying it in unstable seed oils, which is how we moderns typically consume fish, oxidizes those fats and turns a healing food into an inflammatory one. Here's the traditional use. Take a whole fresh fish, scale and gut it. Rub the skin with a little olive oil and salt, and grill it over charcoal or an open flame until the flesh is opaque and flaky. Squeeze fresh lemon juice over it, or, as they might have done, a splash of sour grape juice. We forgot this meal because we turned fish into a processed stick or a deep-fried sandwich, destroying the very nutrients that make it sacred. Think of this simple broiled fish as a maintenance crew for your brain, arriving with the exact fatty acids your neurons need to repair and communicate. A meal so fundamental it was the first thing the resurrected body requested. Number 17. The Birthright Bowl, Jacob's red lentil stew, the ultimate exhaustion cure. In Genesis 25, Esau comes in from the field, and he is famished and exhausted to the point of desperation. Jacob had simmered a red lentil stew, and the aroma alone pulled Esau toward it. He traded his entire birthright for that single bowl. For centuries, commentators have debated whether Esau was foolish or not. But let me offer you a different perspective based on the actual biochemistry of this stew. Esau wasn't just hungry. He was likely in a state of profound physical depletion. And he knew exactly what was in that pot. Red lentils are a dense, calorie-rich, and when dried, shelf-stable survival food. One cooked cup delivers 18 grams of plant-based protein, a massive dose of iron, folate, zinc, magnesium, and potassium. This is the exact mineral profile you need to replenish after extreme physical exertion. But the magic of the Birthright Bowl was in the full preparation. The lentils were soaked, breaking down the phytic acid that would otherwise block the absorption of those desperately needed minerals. They were simmered with cumin, which modern pharmacology shows stimulates the secretion of digestive enzymes, and coriander, which reduces intestinal spasms. And then, crucially, a generous stream of extra virgin olive oil was poured over the top, making every single fat-soluble vitamin and antioxidant in that bowl bioavailable to a starving body. Here's the traditional use. Soak red lentils for several hours, drain, then simmer with water, a pinch of salt, a generous amount of cumin and coriander, and perhaps a crushed clove of garlic. Once tender, finish with a heavy pour of raw olive oil. Esau wasn't foolish. He was exhausted, and his body knew that this specific combination of legumes, spices, and fat was a life-saving intervention. The real question is, why aren't you eating this every week? We forgot it because we reach for a sugary energy drink or a protein bar made of soy isolate. Think of Jacob's stew as the emergency room in your backyard, a complete mineral and protein repletion protocol in a single pot, waiting for you to remember it. Number 16. The bitter herbs of liberation, the liver detoxifier you've abandoned. In Exodus 12, the night of the first Passover, God commands the Israelites to roast a lamb and eat it with bitter herbs. This wasn't a garnish. It was a divine prescription for a people who had been enslaved, malnourished, and exposed to the toxic burdens of a lifetime of hard labor. Bitter herbs like dandelion greens, chicory, endive, and wild lettuce are powerful hepatic stimulants. Their bitterness, detected by receptors all along your digestive tract, triggers a cascade of events. The production of saliva, the release of stomach acid, and most importantly, The flow of bile from your liver and gallbladder. Bile is your body's primary vehicle for escorting fat-soluble toxins and metabolic waste out of your system. Modern herbalism now understands this as the bitter principle, but God instructed it as a sacred meal component thousands of years ago. Here's the traditional use. Gather a handful of fresh, wild bitter greens, wash them thoroughly, and eat them raw alongside a meal of clean animal protein and healthy fat. The fat from the lamb and olive oil triggers the gallbladder to contract and release the bile that the bitter greens have stimulated, creating a perfect detoxification circuit. We forgot this meal because we've bred the bitterness out of our vegetables in favor of sweetness. And we've replaced digestive tonics with antacids that shut down our stomach acid. Think of the Passover bitter, herbs as a drain cleaner for your liver's filtration system. An ancient spring cleaning that was mandated by God to prepare a people for freedom. Number 15, the shepherd's blood builder, roasted lamb with dates and herbs that cures anemia. The pastoral imagery of the Bible is filled with shepherds tending their flocks, and the consumption of lamb was central to feasts and sacrificial meals. But when you pair roasted lamb with specific fruits and herbs, you create a targeted protocol for one of the most common nutritional deficiencies in human history. Iron deficiency anemia. Lamb is rich in heme iron, the most bioavailable form of iron that exists, and it comes packaged with highly absorbable zinc and the full spectrum of B vitamins, especially B12, which is critical for red blood cell formation. Now here's the ancient clinical insight. Eating lamb alongside dates, which are rich in fruit acids and natural sugars, dramatically enhances the absorption of that heme iron. The fruit acids chelate the mineral, keeping it soluble and ready for uptake in the small intestine. Adding bitter herbs and spices like cumin further stimulates the digestive fire, ensuring the protein and minerals are fully broken down and assimilated. Here's the traditional use. Take a leg or shoulder of lamb, rub it with crushed garlic, a paste of cumin and coriander and salt. Slow roast it until tender. Serve it on a platter surrounded by fresh or stewed dates and a handful of raw bitter greens. We forgot this meal because we associate anemia with a pill bottle of ferrous sulfate, which is constipating and poorly absorbed. Think of this roasted lamb platter as a blood transfusion on a plate. A meal so rich in bioavailable iron and cofactors that it can literally lift the fog of exhaustion from a depleted body. Number 14. The goat herd's fermented feast, a living yogurt that rewires your gut-brain axis. The patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob kept vast herds of goats, and their milk was a staple. But fresh milk spoils quickly in a hot desert climate. The ancient solution, which we now know was a profound health practice, was fermentation. Goat's milk has a fundamentally different protein structure than cow's milk. It's predominantly A2 casein, which for many people produces far less digestive irritation and inflammation than the A1 casein found in most modern dairy. When you allow that goat's milk to ferment naturally into a thick, tangy yogurt, you populate it with billions of living bacteria, lactobacillus and bifidobacterium strains. These are the psychobiotics that modern research is now linking to a reduction in anxiety and depression via the gut-brain axis. You are literally eating a living food that communicates with your central nervous system. Here's the traditional use. Take fresh, unpasteurized goat's milk, warm it gently, and introduce a spoonful of a previous batch's yogurt or a wild starter. Let it sit in a warm place, covered, until it sets into a custard. Eat it with a drizzle of raw honey and perhaps some chopped almonds. We forgot this meal because we pasteurize everything to death, killing the bacteria that are the whole point, and we eat dead. Sugar-laden yogurts that are more candy than medicine. Think of this fermented goat's milk as a software update for your brain, installing a colony of beneficial microbes that produce calming neurotransmitters right in your gut. A practice the patriarchs performed daily. Number 13. The garlic and onion immunity shield, the antimicrobial stew that slaves cried for. As the Israelites wandered in the wilderness, they wept with longing for the foods of Egypt, specifically naming garlic and onions. From a purely nutritional standpoint, their craving was eerily accurate. Garlic contains allicin, a sulfur compound so potent that it's considered a broad-spectrum antimicrobial. But allicin isn't just sitting in the clove. It's a defense mechanism created the moment the clove is crushed, chopped, or bitten into. Onions are flooded with quercetin, a polyphenol that acts as a natural antihistamine and anti-inflammatory. And they are packed with inulin-type fructans, a prebiotic fiber that feeds the exact gut bacteria we just discussed. When you combine crushed garlic and chopped onion into a slow-simmered stew with other vegetables and a fat source like olive oil, you create a systemic immune-fortifying meal. The allicin from the garlic works acutely against pathogens. The quercetin from the onion calms an overactive histamine and inflammatory response. And the prebiotic fiber strengthens the very gut lining that houses 70% of your immune system. Here's the traditional use. Chop onions and let them sit for 10 minutes to maximize their quercetin. Crush fresh garlic cloves and let them sit for 10 minutes to allow the allicin to form. Sauté them gently in olive oil, then add to any lentil, bean, or vegetable stew right at the end of cooking to preserve the heat-sensitive compounds. We forgot this meal because we simply don't believe food can be that powerful. We reach for a synthetic antihistamine or an immune supplement tablet, ignoring the actual medicine growing in the dirt. Think of this simple garlic and onion base as a security detail for your bloodstream, an edible antibiotic and antihistamine that the Israelites knew was worth weeping over. Number 12, the pomegranate blood vessel repair, a juice that scrubs your arteries clean. The pomegranate was so sacred that it was embroidered onto the hem of the high priest's robe and carved into the pillars of Solomon's temple. It was one of the 7 species of the Promised Land. Modern interventional cardiology has now revealed why this fruit was so revered. Pomegranates contain a unique polyphenol called punicalagin, which is the compound responsible for that deep ruby stain. When you consume it, your gut bacteria break punicalagin down into smaller molecules called urolithins. These urolithins have demonstrated, in controlled human studies, the ability to reduce arterial plaque, lower systolic blood pressure, and prevent the oxidation of LDL cholesterol, which is the actual initiating event of atherosclerosis. Drinking a small glass of fresh, unsweetened pomegranate juice or eating the whole arils is like sending a repair crew through your vascular system. Here's the traditional use. Crack open a whole pomegranate and either press the arils for their juice or eat them whole, seeds and all. The seed itself contains an oil rich in a unique fatty acid that further contributes to the anti-inflammatory effect. We forgot this meal because we drink sugary juice cocktails that have never seen a real pomegranate. Think of this fruit as a pressure washer for your arteries, a sacred, ruby-red tool for reversing the damage of the modern diet, hidden in plain sight on the robes of the priesthood. Number 11, the cucumber and mint cooler, the digestive antispasmodic for a stressed-out gut. Like the garlic and onions, the Israelites in the wilderness also lamented the loss of the cucumbers they ate in Egypt. Cucumbers might seem like a trivial food, nothing but water, but they contain a class of compounds called cucurbitacins, which modern research has shown possess significant anti-inflammatory properties. Their true biblical synergy, however, emerges when paired with mint. Mint has profoundly well-documented antispasmodic effects on the smooth muscle of the entire digestive tract. It directly activates the TRPM8 receptor, essentially sending a chill signal that relaxes cramping and soothes visceral hypersensitivity. A simple salad of sliced cucumbers, torn fresh mint leaves, a pinch of salt, and a drizzle of olive oil and vinegar is a direct, targeted therapy for an irritable, spasming gut. Here's the traditional use. Slice cucumbers thinly, salt them lightly to draw out excess water, and toss with generous amounts of fresh mint, a splash of raw wine vinegar, and olive oil. We forgot this meal because we dismiss it as just a salad, while we pop chalky antacids and prescription pills for IBS that have a list of side effects longer than the original complaint. Think of this cucumber and mint dish as a chill pill for your intestines, a cooling, muscle-relaxing balm delivered from the inside, proving that sometimes the most profound healers are the quietest ones on the plate. Number 10, the roasted root garden, a prebiotic feast buried in the earth. Before the fall, before the flood, root vegetables and the plants of the field were man's original diet. Think of the root vegetables that grow in the dark soil of the Middle East. Carrots, beets, and turnips. These are storage organs for the plant, and they are dense with stored energy in the form of complex carbohydrates and fibers. But what makes them a healing meal is the roasting process. Roasting concentrates their natural sugars through caramelization and makes their cell walls more digestible. They are loaded with beta-carotene, which your body converts to vitamin A for immune and eye health, as well as potassium and folate. But their most profound gift is their prebiotic fiber. These fibers resist digestion in your stomach and small intestine and travel intact to your colon, where they selectively feed the beneficial bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids, compounds that heal the lining of your colon and reduce systemic inflammation. Here's the traditional use. Chop a mix of carrots, beets, and turnips into chunks, toss them in olive oil and salt, and roast them slowly in a hot oven or in the coals of a fire until they are tender and browned at the edges. Finish with a drizzle of raw honey and a sprinkle of fresh dill. We forgot this meal because we think of vegetables as a chore to be steamed into bland submission. Think of this tray of roasted roots as a delivery system for underground medicine, sending a feast directly to the bacterial allies in your gut that are keeping you thin, happy, and alive. Number 9, the ancient grain sourdough, a fermented flatbread that won't inflame you. Bread is the staff of life, but the bread of the Bible bears almost no resemblance to the plastic-wrapped factory loaves of today. The original bread was made with ancient grains like einkorn or emmer wheat, stone ground with the germ and bran intact. And critically, it was almost certainly fermented. Before the advent of commercial yeast, a dough of flour and water left out would naturally capture wild yeasts and lactobacilli bacteria, becoming a sourdough. This long, slow fermentation process is the secret that makes bread a healing food. The bacteria predigest the gluten proteins, making them far less inflammatory and easier for the human gut to handle. They also neutralize phytic acid, unlocking the minerals in the whole grain. When this fermented flatbread is baked on hot stones and then drenched in extra virgin olive oil, you create a complete package of beta-glucan fiber for blood sugar control and olecanthal polyphenols for inflammation reduction. Here's the traditional use. Create a sourdough starter with flour and water. Feed it daily. Use it to leaven a dough of freshly milled ancient grain flour. Let it ferment for many hours. Then shape it into flat rounds and bake on a hot stone or in a cast iron skillet. Drench in olive oil immediately upon removing from the heat. We forgot this meal because we invented the Chorleywood bread process, which churns out a loaf in 3 hours from grain to package, devoid of fermentation, indigestible to many, and a primary driver of modern gluten intolerance. Think of this sourdough flatbread as a predigested, mineral-rich energy source, the true staff of life that was broken at every biblical table. Number 8, the living honeycomb. Raw honey, the antimicrobial wound healer you can eat. The phrase, a land flowing with milk and honey, is arguably the most famous description of God's provision in Scripture. But the honey of the Bible was not the clear, pasteurized syrup in a bear-shaped bottle. It was raw, unfiltered, and likely still in the comb. Raw honey is a living substance. It contains glucose oxidase, an enzyme that, when exposed to body fluids, slowly releases hydrogen peroxide, the same antiseptic you buy in a brown bottle at the drugstore. It also contains defensin-1, a bee-derived protein that is part of the insect's own immune system and acts as an antimicrobial in the human body. This is why raw honey was used topically in ancient wound care, and why consuming it supports a healthy oral and upper respiratory immune defense. When you eat a piece of comb, you also get the propolis and pollen, which add their own immune-modulating compounds. Here's the traditional use. Take a small piece of raw honeycomb, chew it slowly to release the honey and swallow. Then you can either swallow the beeswax or spit it out. The wax itself is a source of long-chain fatty acids and alcohols that have been studied for their own health properties. We forgot this meal because we pasteurize honey, heating it until all the live enzymes are dead, turning it into nothing more than liquid sugar. Think of a piece of raw honeycomb as a functional food bandage for the inside of your body, a slow-drip antimicrobial that God placed in the center of the promised land's promise. Number 7. The vineyard and the goat cheese, resveratrol and live probiotics for cellular longevity. This is a meal of synergy that would have been a common farmer's lunch in ancient Israel. Grapes fresh off the vine are one of the few natural sources of resveratrol, a polyphenol that activates sirtuins, a class of proteins associated with DNA repair and the extension of cellular lifespan. The skins of dark grapes also contain quercetin and anthocyanins, powerful anti-inflammatory pigments. But when you pair these grapes with a fresh, soft, fermented cheese made from goat's milk, the combination becomes transformative. The live bacteria in the cheese begin to colonize the gut, while the polyphenols from the grapes act as a prebiotic and a systemic anti-inflammatory. Modern research into the gut microbiome is exploring exactly this kind of combination, looking at how polyphenols from fruit and live bacteria from fermented dairy can work together to diversify the gut ecosystem and modulate the immune response. Here's the traditional use. Take a cluster of dark, ripe grapes, still slightly dusty from the vine. Eat them alongside a wedge of fresh, tangy goat cheese. That's it. No bread required. We forgot this meal because we separated fruit and cheese into a dessert course and a cheese board. And we pasteurized the life out of the cheese. Think of this simple pairing of grapes and goat cheese as a cellular youth treatment, a combination of compounds that tells your DNA to repair itself while simultaneously rebuilding the bacterial army in your gut. Number 6. The almond and fig travel cake, the shelf-stable energy of the prophets. When God called Jeremiah, he showed him a vision of an almond branch, signifying that he was watching over his word to perform it. Almonds were a sacred food. They are the only nut explicitly mentioned in the Bible. They are rich in vitamin E, magnesium, monounsaturated fats, and protein. When you combine them with dried figs, which are packed with rapidly available sugars, calcium, and potassium, you create a perfectly balanced, shelf-stable ration. For a prophet, a shepherd, or a traveler, this was the ultimate portable meal. The fats and protein from the almonds slow the sugar absorption from the figs, providing sustained energy without a crash. The calcium and magnesium work in concert to support muscle and nerve function, and the fiber from both feeds the gut. Here's the traditional use. Take dried figs and almonds and simply eat them together, chewing thoroughly. For a more elaborate version, they can be ground together into a paste and formed into small cakes. We forgot this meal because we replaced it with granola bars held together with corn syrup and soy lecithin. Think of this almond and fig cake as the original energy bar, a food that God used as a symbol of his watchful care, designed to fuel a body on a divine mission. Number 5. The olive oil anointing, the anti-inflammatory that works like ibuprofen. Extra virgin olive oil is the backbone of every biblical meal, but it deserves its own place on this list because of a compound called olecanthal. This is a polyphenol found only in high-quality, fresh, extra virgin olive oil. It has a distinctive peppery sting at the back of the throat, and it is not just a flavor note. It is a pharmacological signal. Researchers have discovered that olecanthal exerts its anti-inflammatory effect through the exact same mechanism as ibuprofen. It inhibits COX-1 and COX-2 enzymes. The difference is that a daily dose of this in your food doesn't come with the gastrointestinal bleeding and kidney damage risks of long-term NSAID use. Olive oil was used to anoint kings and priests, and it was the fuel for the lampstand in the temple. It was a symbol of the Holy Spirit, and we now understand it is a literal, physical healer, combating the cellular inflammation at the root of heart disease, cancer, and autoimmune conditions. Here's the traditional use. Consume at least 2 tablespoons of high-quality, fresh, peppery extra virgin olive oil daily, raw, never heated to its smoke point. Pour it over your bread, your stew, your vegetables, and your roast lamb. We forgot this meal component because we replaced it with cheap, refined, deodorized vegetable oils that are rancid and inflammatory. Think of extra virgin olive oil as a liquid anti-inflammatory drug, a sacred balm that works from the inside out, making every other food on this list more healing and more bioavailable. Number 4. The date-fueled delivery, the fruit that makes childbirth easier. This is one of the most astonishing confirmations of biblical food wisdom by modern obstetrics. Dates were a staple. The honey in a land flowing with milk and honey often refers to date honey. The fruit is dense with natural sugars, but also fiber, magnesium, potassium, and a unique profile of compounds that mimic oxytocin. Multiple randomized, controlled clinical trials, published in mainstream obstetrics journals, have found that women who consume 6 dates a day in the final 4 weeks of pregnancy have a significantly higher cervical dilation upon admission to the hospital, are more likely to go into labor spontaneously, have a shorter first stage of labor, and require less medical augmentation with synthetic oxytocin. This is a food that literally prepares the body for one of the most physically demanding events a human can experience. Here's the traditional use. Eat 6 to 7 medjool or deglet nor dates daily in the final month of pregnancy. They can be eaten whole, blended into a smoothie with goat's milk, or stuffed with an almond. We forgot this meal because we medicalized birth to the point where a simple, God-given fruit that prepares the uterus is ignored in favor of a synthetic drip. Think of the date as a natural pitocin, a muscle-preparing fuel that the Creator designed specifically to aid in the delivery of new life. Number 3, the dill and cumin nerve tonic, a spice blend that calms the anxious mind. Jesus rebuked the Pharisees for tithing meticulously on herbs like dill and cumin, while neglecting the weightier matters of the law. But the very fact that they were tithing these herbs shows how valuable they were. And their value was not just culinary, it was neurological. Dill, sometimes translated as anise, has been studied for its effects on the nervous system, demonstrating the ability to act as a mild sedative and anxiety reducer. Cumin, as we've discussed, activates digestion, but it also has a stabilizing effect on blood sugar. And blood sugar crashes are a primary driver of anxiety, irritability, and panic. A tea or a broth infused with dill and cumin is a direct intervention for a nervous system stuck in fight-or-flight mode. Here's the traditional use. Steep a teaspoon of crushed dill seeds and a teaspoon of cumin seeds in hot water for 10 minutes. Strain and sip slowly, or add a generous amount of both to a simmering lentil or vegetable stew. We forgot this meal because we split the body from the mind, treating anxiety with synthetic pills rather than calming the entire physiological system with the nervine herbs that our ancestors knew intimately. Think of a bowl of cumin and dill-infused broth as a warm blanket for your central nervous system, a biblical anxiolytic that works through the gut-brain axis to bring a state of calm, a medicine Jesus himself acknowledged as worthy of a tithe. Number 2, the Passover detox protocol, bitter herbs and lamb for a total system reset. We've discussed the bitter herbs and the lamb separately, but their full power is revealed in the commanded combination of Exodus 12. This is a complete detoxification and rebuilding protocol. The bitter greens flush the liver and gallbladder, preparing the entire digestive system. The roasted lamb provides a massive influx of bioavailable protein, fat, and heme iron to rebuild tissue and blood. The bitter herbs stimulate the bile, which is necessary to emulsify and absorb all the fat-soluble vitamins in the lamb. It's a perfect closed-loop system. You can't fully absorb the nutrients from the meat without the bile, and the bitter herbs ensure the bile is flowing. The meal was to be eaten with unleavened bread, which, as a simple flour and water cracker, acts as a clean, non-fermenting starch to bind the meal together without introducing any leaven. A biblical symbol of corruption and sin. Here's the traditional use. This is a meal to be done intentionally, perhaps quarterly or during times of physical stagnation. Gather a selection of wild or cultivated bitter greens. Roast a cut of lamb. Prepare a simple unleavened flatbread. Eat the lamb and bread with handfuls of the bitter greens. We forgot this meal because we've lost the concept of a deliberate, seasonal physiological reset. Think of it as a divine spring cleaning for your entire body. a hard reboot of the digestive and immune systems that was commanded by God to prepare a people for a grueling journey to freedom. Number 1. The 7-species matrix, the complete nutritional system of the promised land. And finally, number 1 is not just a single meal, it is the entire matrix. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 8, God describes the promised land as a land of wheat, barley vines, fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil, and honey. This is not a random poem. When you consume these 7 foods together as a system, you are giving your body every single macro and micronutrient it needs, along with a synergistic array of healing compounds that modern science is only just beginning to map. Wheat and barley give you complementary proteins and the powerful beta-glucan fiber for heart and gut health. Grapes give you resveratrol and anthocyanins for cellular protection and longevity. Figs deliver a massive dose of calcium and potassium, minerals that are critically deficient in the modern diet and essential for bone density and blood pressure regulation. Pomegranates offer punicalagin and urolithins to scrub your arteries and fight cancer at a cellular level. Olive oil provides the monounsaturated fats and oleocanthal that make every other food more absorbable while directly inhibiting the COX-2 inflammatory pathway. And the date honey provides a clean, fiber-rich source of rapid energy, loaded with the minerals and tannins that support blood and immunity. A meal that incorporates all 7, for example, a piece of whole-grain barley bread, a handful of grapes, a sliced fig, some pomegranate arils, a dish of olive oil for dipping, and a small dish of date honey, is the most complete, synergistic, healing meal I can describe. It is the gold standard. Here's the traditional use. Create a platter containing all 7 species. Make this a weekly or even daily practice. Dip your bread in the oil and the honey, eat the fruits, drink a little red wine from the grapes. We forgot this system because we were seduced by the reductionist promise of a multivitamin pill, a lifeless tablet that can never replicate the thousands of synergistic phytonutrients in a God-given matrix of whole foods. Think of the 7 species of Deuteronomy 8 as the ultimate prescription for human health, a complete nutritional covenant that was written into the very description of the land of promise. It's a meal that doesn't just prevent disease. It actively builds vitality, cell by cell, exactly as it was designed to.